What is up? Welcome back to another Salt and Pauper Saturday video. Today we have a really exciting deck for you. We're bringing back something that has largely fallen out of the meta with some brand new cards from the new set, Outlaws of Thunder Junction. So let's check it out. Alright guys, you have seen the thumbnail, you have seen the title. We are playing Rakdos Madness, otherwise known as Rakdos Burn or Black-Red Burn, Black-Red Discard. There are lots and lots of names for it, but we are spotlighting two brand new cards from Outlaws of Thunder Junction, namely Raven of the Fell Omens. This is an amazing 2-drop that was printed. It is a 1/2 for 2 with flying. And whenever you commit a crime, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life, but it only triggers once per turn. So, committing a crime is very simple. You just have to target an opponent or anything they control or cards in their graveyard. Pretty much all of our removal and or burn spells target, so everything we cast is going to trigger Raven. We cast most of our spells at instant speed, so we're able to go back and forth on each turn. Seemed like a very natural fit in this deck, and then also we are taking advantage of the new ping lands introduced in Outlaws, namely Jagged Barrens, which is just a dual land, enters play tapped, and it pings target opponent. That does trigger the Raven of the Fell Omens. So we have lots and lots of cool options here. And throughout my week of testing, we took on a lot of decks in the metagame, but I want to show you guys a couple of games where I really think the power of this deck in this meta is shown even through some adversity. So let's jump in to game number 1. All right, so game number 1 is going to be against Sally85. This is a very, very solid keep. We have a dual land. We have 2 lands, one of each color. We've got a Demand Answer, the Scrapwork Mod, a Faithless Looting, and Galblast. We don't have a ton of our Madness cards quite yet, but this is a very, very keepable hand. And it looks right off the bat like we're up against Jeskai Ephemerate, as we're going to see very quickly. 2 Jeskai lands. We're just going to lead on an Epicure here. Start to get our artifacts online. We make Metalcraft. Opponent goes for the Cleansing Wildfire here, which is going to find an island. We end of turn a Galblast here just to ensure that we're not up against counter spells next turn. We land the Faithless Looting. We discard a Scrapwork Mutt. Similarly, end of turn here, we're going to go for a Lightning Bolt. Try to force the counter spell. Opponent lets it happen. We pop the blood and go straight into a Demand Answers. We do find a Fiery Temper, so we can definitely unearth that Scrapwork Mutt to cash in on that. Opponent not doing a whole lot here, drawing a ton of Cleansing Wildfires. Not really wanting to interact with our board because it's just a 1/1, so they're really trying to go deep and just set up 7 cards in hand, so they have a ton of resources here, but they go to 2... And that's pretty much all she wrote. We're going to be able to clean this game up pretty quickly here. We're just going to bring the Scrapwork Mutt back. We're going to cast the Fiery Temper, and they can either counter the Fiery Temper or handle our creatures, but they can't do both. So that locks up game number 1. Very explosive start. It was only turn 5 that we presented lethal here. Opponent had a ton of lands and 7 cards in hand, but we just did not give them time to stabilize. So definitely a strong burn package. Didn't see any of the new cards though, so we'll see what we can do about that in game number 2. All right, game number 2, we are again on the draw because we won game number 1. Let's take a quick look at our sideboard here. We took out a Kitchen Imp, an Epicure, and a Fiery Temper for 3 red Elemental Blasts. Really, this is just to fight counter spells and try to make sure that we can get in that last few points of damage. The deck is fairly slow. It runs a lot of dual lands, so hopefully we're able to kind of bust out in the gates again. We do see a couple of Ravens in this opening hand. Unfortunately, this is not a keepable hand, so we're going to go down to 6 here. This is a much more keepable hand. Fiery Temper, Alms of the Van, Faithless Looting looks great here. Unfortunately, we don't have Metalcraft, so we are going to throw this Fiery Temper back, keeping the Galv Blast, just hoping that it gives us more value than the Fiery Temper would have later. And opponent starts out with a tap land again, which is great for us. We're going to follow suit this time, though, and tap land ourselves. And try to take this game a little bit slower now that we know what the opponent's on. We also have a pretty significantly slower hand here, so we're going to have to take this slow. We do hit a couple of our ping lands here, which definitely start the uncounterable damage, which is super nice. All right, we lead with the ping land. We're just going to play this pretty slow. No reason to Faithless Looting there, as we can't actually cast the Alms of the Van with Madness. We draw another Drawsforce Bridge, though, which is pretty nice. It allows us to have Metalcraft for that Galv Blast eventually. We do go ahead and play another Jagged Barrens, though. Opponent really just kind of ramping it up, holding all of their resources up this time, not willing to let us get some free burn spells through like they did last game. Understandable. Now this turn is when we're going to go for the Faithless Looting here. We can cast both of these Alms of the Veins. We're going to get some value out of it. Force a counterspell from the opponent, but we do get to hit with the second one, which is perfect. We do have Faithless Looting to flashback later, and now we are set up to Metalcraft both of these Galv Blasts. Doesn't leave us with a ton in hand. We will have a couple of blood tokens to fall back on, though. So currently the plan is still just kind of go for it. Haven't seen any real way to stabilize out of the opponent. Keep waiting for a Murmuring Mystic or something to come down. We wouldn't have a great answer for it, but they just have yet to present a real threat. So they're giving us all the time in the world. Sitting back, really trying to play the control game, but unfortunately, that's not a winning game for them. 25-13 currently. We are going to end of turn toss one of those lands away. We can go for the Fiery Temper here. So we're going to see if we can force a counterspell here at the end of turn. We have 11 damage in hand, so we're only 2 off. Opponent has 5 cards in hand, so we really just want to see if they're going to counterspell here. They do show us a blue Elemental Blast, so they're holding up a counterspell still. But we draw a Raven, which is great here. That turns a lot of these into extra value. We're going to go ahead and Lightning Bolt here. It's the least value. We get a trigger, but unfortunately they have a bolt. So the Raven is going to die pretty immediately. Unfortunate we don't get to cash it in for more value here, but it did get 1 extra damage through, so now they are an effective 1. Really just need 1 damage and a chance to sneak through these Galv Blasts. Really waiting to see if the opponent just sort of goes for something here. We cast this Vampire's Kiss. They let it go through, which is great for us. It means they are effectively dead on the clock. It's just a matter of picking our timing for these Galv Blasts. And we're going to be able to use these Bloods. to really make sure that we don't hit any dead draws and we can keep the pressure coming turn after turn. Opponent still has yet to play a creature to the board, which is pretty amazing here. Not sure if they just really are misdrawing here or just holding up a ton of creature interaction and we're playing a creatureless game plan. We hit another Vampire's Kiss, which is great. Opponent finally puts a creature on the board and shows a Lorien Revealed. I found it very strange that they just go for this here. And then they Cleansing Wildfire. We're going to force the counter spell here. And now we're going to Gal Blast to ensure that they go down to 1. And we have 5 draws. 7 draws if you count the Faithful Suiting here, but can't use all of it. But we have an effective 5 draws here to hit a way to win the game. We hit a Voldaren Epicure. Not sure if they could possibly have any answer here, but we just looked for some extra damage to seal the deal. We hit double Red Blast, which is kind of funny. We're just going to discard those and then play that Voldaren Epicure to seal the game. And that is the match against this Jeskai control list. Really weird run out, but got to see just having the extra couple of damage from these lands, that extra ping from the Raven really does add up. I mean, that's a whole extra bolt that got through and was unred blastable. So really, really showing that it adds just a little bit of reach to this deck, which is really all it needed, right? So this deck pretty consistently got you down to like 3 or 5 or less, really, and then struggled to hit the last burn spell to finish the game, right? So these add up and really do make it that much closer to closing out the game before it runs out of resources. So definitely welcome improvements to the deck, and I had a ton of fun playing it. But let's jump into game number 2, which was a much more interesting game with a way different style of deck. So let's jump right in. All right, we are on the draw against Potato. And this is definitely a very keepable hand. Demand Answers, Deadly Dispute, Bolt, Galv Blast. We're going to be able to utilize all of this draw pretty quickly, provided we draw anything that makes a blood token. We're really going to be cashing in for value here. So we're definitely going to run it with this. Opponent leads on an island here. Could be a few things, could be mono blue, but shows us a forest immediately and then foretells a card, which tells us instantly that this is a Turbo Fog opponent. So we really, really need to play around the 4 main board. Weather the Storm here, that's going to be the primary stabilization mechanic. And we are going to play a lot of this game while the opponent is tapped out or at the end of the opponent's turn and try to minimize the value of those Weather the Storms. We get down an Epicure, cash in a Deadly Dispute. We're just going to start kind of chugging along, 1 spell at a time here. Opponent tapped out, so we know we are safe to deploy all of these resources without a Weather the Storm at the end of the turn. So we go ahead and tap out there. If the opponent's going to spend their whole turn storming up with like Preordains and things, we're okay with that. Opponent's at 7. We have a ping. Just take them to 6. This takes them to 5. They have 7 cards in hand, so we're fully expecting a Weather the Storm here. We're going to play 1 spell at the end of their turn, see if they play anything. They don't. We just go for an attack, and they Weather Raw for just 3, which feels like a huge mistake when they could have gotten at least 3 extra life at the end of their own turn. Opponent goes for a Growth Spiral here, assuming they have another Weather the Storm. So we go for the Alms of the Veins with the Fiery Temper backup. They do have another Weather the Storm, so we're glad we played around it, and we closed the game pretty quickly on a very, very aggressive start with lots of direct damage. Opponent kind of had the goods. Double Weather the Storm is exactly what you want in this matchup, but we were able to play around it. And fortunately, we were able to put them in a position where they just kind of had to rip it, and we were able to beat right through it. So game number 2 should be very, very interesting. Let's jump in and see what happens. All right, so game number 2 against Potato. This is post-sideboard against Turbo Fog. We are expecting a ton of countermeasures. We did not bring in the Red Elemental Blasts against this. The Arcanes and Isles and stuff are just going to resolve And they're really just giving us cards back, so I don't think it's too big a deal if those resolve. They're definitely going to be bringing in Dispels against us, which is a little unfortunate, but I think the main configuration of the deck is probably correct. We just need to be very conscious of those Weather the Storms as an out, and not let them get a Weather the Storm on our turn or when we fire off a bunch of burn spells. So just have to really be careful there and play around it. We should be able to do the same thing we did in game 1. So this is certainly a keep. Doesn't have any discard enablers, which is a little bit scary, but we do have tons of outs in this deck, so we're going to run it and see how it goes. Opponent leads on a tap lane here. We will too, just trying to deploy our lands, make sure we don't hit any color restrictions here. Hit a Jagged Barrens, which is great. Start the pings off early here. Opponent just rips a Stream of Thought at us to mill 4. They give us a Faithless Looting and a Scrapwork Mutt in the graveyard, which is pretty great. We're just going to go for a Lightning Bolt. They do dispel it. We go ahead and unearth the Scrapwork Mutt to cash out on this Alms the Vein. Unfortunately, I had accidentally passed priority through my main phase 1, so I don't get to attack with it. It's a little bit lame. We missed 2 damage there, which is unfortunate. But opponent goes for a Brainstorm after a Growth Spiral, so we know that they can't weather the storm. We go ahead and deploy a Galv Blast, just while it's safe to do so. End of their turn, we're going to cash in on a Deadly Dispute and see if it resolves. They go through a Growth Spiral, Frantic Inventory, and a Weather the Storm to gain 12. Not the best, but we are very conscious of playing into those, so they only got 1 spell out of us for that storm count, which is fine. We're going to go for an Epicure here. Now that they're tapped out, we cash in the Blood immediately for Kitchen Imp and go for a Gal Blast while their shields are down. Start to put a clock on them here. Hit them with a Vampire's Kiss. We got double Fiery Temper in hand and 2 blood tokens on the field, so we can deploy both. We also have another Faithless Looting in the graveyard if we want to cash that in. We're just going to start putting pressure on them 3 damage at a time, make them do something about it. We go for a Faithless and they Arcane Denial, so we just kind of say thank you to the draw 2 without having to discard. End of turn, we go for the Fiery Temper. And we cash in the second Fiery Temper while they're tapped out, just to make sure that they cannot deploy that Weather the Storm. We're going to put them at 3 off that Lightning Bolt draw. And they're going to have to do something about this board. We draw 2. Thank you very much. They foretell a card, so we know we've got to Behold the Multiverse coming to hit a Fog or something. We're going to go ahead and swing. They crack the Moment's Piece. That's fine. We'll play the Jagged Barrens, put them at 2. Not play into this Weather the Storm out. They do have 2 mana up after Beholding the Multiverse, so we want to make sure they don't cash in on a Weather there if we deploy a bunch of resources. We do hit the Bolt, though, so we're just going to swing, make them have it. They crack a Brainstorm. Go for a Weather the Storm Raw again. They just get the 6 life out of it, which is fine. They go back to 5 here. Now, we definitely could have gone for it, but if they had another Weather the Storm, it was definitely going to be bad for us. So we just let it resolve and start to put pressure on them 1 spell at a time. Again, just trying to minimize that Weather the Storm value, I think, is really, really important in this matchup. We're going to take 2 more cards off an Arcane Denial and say thank you very much. Opponent is going to scoop here. We have lethal damage on board. They do reveal their hand, and it was 4 lands. After they brainstormed, I'm assuming they locked themselves. GG's to the opponent. Definitely showed how powerful the deck is. Played Fell, Raven of the Fells in several of the games, and it felt pretty good. Admittedly, I'm not sure if it's better than just running the Goblin Tomb Raider, which is the spot that that card is in right now. But it is very often you get at least 2 triggers out of the Raven, so it does deal the same amount of damage on average, and you're gaining life out of it, so it's a 4 life swing instead of a 2 life swing. Oftentimes you get more value from the Raven just because you're able to ping. It's also a flyer, which on some odd occasions against things like glitters, it was relevant because it was able to block their Ornithopters and things like that. But overall, I think the card choice there for Raven versus Goblin is very close. I really liked Raven. I think that it helps hedge some matchups against other aggressive decks just by adding that much more life gain. And overall, really happy with the new cards. Demand Answers, Raven of the Fell, Jagged Barrens. All of these cards did very, very well in this deck, and really happy to see this deck is powerful enough to keep up with the meta. So hopefully you guys give it a try. Good luck in your leagues. I hope you enjoy the video, and stay tuned next week because I have an awesome collab from another YouTuber coming to you next weekend, doing a very cool challenge, cross-format play. So if you're interested in seeing whether or not Pauper can take on some decks from your favorite format, stay tuned because that one's going to be a lot of fun to watch. As usual, guys, goodbye forever. Let's see you next time. Peace.